New York City recently, perhaps illegally, implemented a 15 mph e-bike speed limit, which I believe for a few reasons is a bad thing for micromobility in New York. However, I think this is only a symptom of a larger problem. Yes, quite literally a larger problem. These things. Many people, including their manufacturers, refer to them as e-bikes, but technically they are not. Call me crazy, but I believe a bicycle should actually have useful pedals. Not just pedals that move, pedals that actually propel the bike. There are two things that make the pedals on these moped-style e-bikes pretty useless. First off, the weight of these things. For this example, I'm going to use the latest Super 73 F series. I chose this bike because Super 73 is one of the most well-known moped-style e-bike brands, and on their website, they say this bike is for the urban explorer. But first and foremost, weight. Most mid-tier commuter bicycles like the Priority Continuum Onyx and the Brompton C-Line weigh about 30 pounds. A traditional e-bike like the Venton Solterra comes in a bit heavier at 46 pounds, but it still weighs about the same as a city bike or a Dutch Omnifiet. I'm sorry for mispronouncing that. All three weighing about 50 pounds. However, the Super 73 comes in at a whopping 71 pounds, as I mentioned earlier, making these things incredibly difficult to pedal in a case where, let's say, the battery dies. But Joël, you may say, this is an e-bike, it's not meant to be operated without battery assistance. And fine, sure, but even with pedal assist, it's incredibly difficult to pedal these things, because of the fixed low seating position. It's impossible to pedal comfortably or generate any actual power. It's pretty obvious these things were not meant to be cycled. But if it's not meant to be cycled, why are we still calling it a bicycle? But we'll circle back to that later in this video. But first, what is the difference between an e-bike and an electric motorbike, or even a moped? Well, there are 3 federal classifications for e-bikes. Some localities, like New York City, have their own definitions, but we'll stick to the federal classifications for simplicity's sake. Federally, a Class 1 e-bike is a bicycle with a pedal assist and a motor that cuts off after the bike reaches 20 miles an hour. These bikes do not have a throttle. A Class 2 e-bike is similar to a Class 1 e-bike in that the motor still cuts off at 20 miles an hour, but Class 2 bikes do have a throttle. A Class 3 e-bike is like a Class 1 e-bike as there is no throttle, but the motor cuts off at 28 miles an hour instead of 20. In addition, the maximum legal output of motors in all classes is 750 watts. If a motor-powered vehicle either has a throttle that works above 20 miles an hour or a pedal assist beyond 28 miles an hour, it is not an e-bike. It needs to be registered, and the driver needs to be licensed for it to be legally operated on public roads, and it's not allowed in the bike lane. The thing is, manufacturers are clearly claiming these electric motorbikes have top speeds that exceed 30 miles an hour, but they're still marketing them as e-bikes. How is that possible? Well, a lot of these electric motorbikes can be put into a Class 2 e-bike mode, cutting off the throttle when speeds exceed 20 miles an hour. But I'd assume the amount of people actually using these motorbikes in Class 2 mode is fairly similar to the number of people that would return a chicken nugget to McDonald's after realizing they got 11 nugs in their 10-piece. So here's my grand hypothesis. Because manufacturers are just honestly and perhaps illegally marketing these electric motorbikes as e-bikes, people are buying them thinking that they are fully legal e-bikes, or at the very least the public perception of e-bikes is being negatively affected by the high speed, heavy weight, and increased danger of these electric motorbikes. In 2024, a California woman sued Super 73 for negligent and intentional misrepresentation and false advertising. To my knowledge, the case is ongoing, but on all new motorbikes sold, the Class 2 modification can no longer be turned off, meaning the throttle will not work after the bike exceeds 20 miles an hour in any situation. So Super 73 has essentially become a sit-down scooter company, which is fine. Their newest vehicles will always be road legal, but that raises the question, why still even sell a motorbike with pedals? A real e-bike is a way better option because you can pedal it for a workout or even simply ride it home if the battery dies. If someone just wants to sit down and let the throttle do the work, there's no need for pedals and a chain. Why waste the money for these expensive parts and maintenance? It seems Super 73's entire business model was based on the fact that people are going to use their product illegally. I'm not saying that was their intention, but interestingly enough, this whole situation is very similar to what happened to Juul, the e-cig company. Because Juul was the industry leader in flavored e-cigs, they got sued and sanctioned because their product was being used and advertised illegally. However, not much else was done to curb the rest of the flavored e-cig industry, allowing them to thrive and pretty much take over where Juul left off. The same thing is happening with these electric motorbikes. If people want a faster Super 73 clone, there are a million options just a few clicks away on Amazon. So what's the solution? Well, it sure as hell isn't this lawsuit whack-a-mole because as shown with Juul, for every one company that is struck down, another 3 will pop up. I believe the true solution is a 1-2 combo of legislation and actual enforcement of laws, pre-existing and new. The United Kingdom actually has some pretty strict regulations on what is an e-bike. or an electrically assisted pedal cycle. First off, the motor must cut off at 15.5 miles an hour. That's well below the lowest US classification at 20 miles an hour and nearly half of the Class 3 e-bike limit of 28 miles an hour. Second, the motor's power is limited to 250 watts, compared to the 750 watt limit in the US. Side note, you also won't see throttles on most e-bikes in the UK. While they aren't outright banned, these bikes need special approval, and considering the low maximum motor wattage and top speed, it seems most manufacturers don't even bother to add them. Third, bikes that have an off-road mode that enable restrictions to be turned off, such as the Super 73s of the past, cannot be sold as e-bikes and must be registered. Also, one additional thing I forgot is that in the UK, it is the responsibility of the manufacturers to label their bikes as clearly legal e-bikes. They either need to include an EAPC plate or have it clearly stated on the bike, the brand name, the maximum wattage, and the speed at which the motor cuts off, making enforcement of these things a lot easier, and ensures that they won't run into the issue that is going to happen in New York, where people on regular bikes going faster than the e-bike speed limit will be pulled over and ticketed for doing nothing wrong. Those aren't all the rules, but a few of the ones I find most interesting. But do I agree with these regulations? Some I do, some I don't. I think the 15.5 mile per hour speed limit is a bit low. I think we should probably abandon the whole 3-class system altogether here in the States just to decrease confusion. In my opinion, keeping the motor cut off at 20 miles an hour is acceptable, but maybe I'd lower it to 18. An 18 mile an hour cutoff would still allow the average cyclist to be faster on an e-bike compared to a normal bike, but wouldn't allow everyone to fly down the street at competitive road bike speeds. If you're willing and able to go a bit faster, you can continue to pedal without the assist, but for most people, and for safety's sake in general, I think that 18 to 20 miles per hour range is a good speed. Now, when it comes to wattage limits, I am no expert. Anecdotally, I've heard the UK's 250 watt limit may be a bit low to get up those really steep hills without breaking a sweat, but I have to look more into it. However, I think debating maximum wattage is probably trivial compared to the greater issue, top speed. Now about throttles. I'm kind of torn on this because throttles are fun and make e-bikes easier to ride and more accessible, but perhaps we need to throw throttled vehicles into their own separate category. Because when I think about the spirit of bicycling, that doesn't include throttled operation. And if classifying throttled micromobility such as e-scooters and e-skateboards as something else allows pedal assist e-bikes to retain a regulatory status more in line with bicycles, I am all for it. Because at the end of the day, in my opinion, e-bikes are not lightweight mopeds, they're assisted bicycles. Bicycles that assist riders with acceleration, hill climbs, and further distances. E-bikes exist to assist cyclists, not carry the entire load. For these reasons though, I do believe the US should definitely adopt the UK's regulation that any electric motorbike that allows you to bypass the motor speed limiter should not be able to be sold as an e-bike. Regardless of whether it ships in a Class 2 mode or if you need a separate app to unlock it, if the motor has the capability of providing assist at speeds faster than what is currently defined in the US as a Class 2 e-bike, it cannot be marketed as an e-bike. And drivers must be licensed, they cannot use the bike lane, and the vehicle must be registered in some capacity. Now, just to be clear, I am aware that there are multiple factors that have led to this assault on e-bikes, at least in New York City. It's not just the fact that people can easily purchase electric motorbikes, but it's also the way people drive them, and the lack of enforcement of laws already on the books. Cyclists of all forms need to be considerate road users, especially towards pedestrians. I don't care how fast you're going or if the light just turned red, if you're not yielding to pedestrians, you're an asshole, and you're ruining it for the rest of us. Furthermore, I have no issue with treating stop signs and red lights as yield signs, but you actually need to yield to other road users with the right of way, especially pedestrians. Too often in New York, I see cyclists running through red lights at full speed, nearly hitting pedestrians. It really pisses me off. But that topic deserves a whole video of its own. Now, regarding enforcement of current laws, at least in New York, this is entirely on the NYPD. Every single day I see mopeds in the bike lane, not just electric motorbikes, full-on mopeds, speeding down the bike lane, cutting off cyclists, most of them without plates. This is obviously not allowed, but it seems like the NYPD couldn't care less. They're more preoccupied with ticketing cyclists for running through red lights despite jaywalking being completely legal. However, I've already done a video on this. If you want to hear my opinions on either of these topics, you should definitely subscribe. Those videos are either already out or will be out very soon. But to get back on track, the reason why I think our best way forward is to revamp regulations is because it's much easier to control access as opposed to individual behavior. It needs to be way more difficult to get these illegal bikes. There will always be bad actors, and police, well, will be police, especially the NYPD. But jokes aside, I'd rather have the cycling community proactively introduce solutions to these problems before non-cyclists step in and place nonsensical restrictions on micromobility due to their lack of knowledge and desire for political wins. Eric Adams. That's why I'm in favor of the transportation alternatives proposed New York citywide speed limit of 20 miles an hour for all vehicles, cars, bikes, e-bikes, mopeds, everything. But that's also why I propose some of these ideas on how to better regulate e-bikes. We want to ensure people actually know what they're buying, and we want to close the loopholes allowing electric motorbikes to be masqueraded as e-bikes. Again, if we wait for the non-cycling crowd to close that loophole, we're not going to do it in a way that's considered a cyclist that just want an easier way to ride. I'm Joël, this is Micromobile, and please don't forget to subscribe, like this video, comment your thoughts down below. I'll see you very soon. Goodbye.